Hey there, gang. What are we going to talk about today? Wet, dry, wet. I've been giving this a lot of thought for the last year plus because we've all heard about this put out there on social media, YouTube, demos, players, manufacturers, whatnot. What do I think about it? Okay, I've done some very careful consideration of this. I've even put together a special wet, dry, wet board, which I'm going to show you right now. Oh my God. This thing, sorry, well, it's sort of diswired right now. Anyway, yeah. There we go. Okay, so some of it's there, some of it's here. The EP pre is running loose in there because it needs to be tied down because I used to have Pico pre, which is the always on EP pre, but I moved that to another board. Anyway, this is my wet, dry, wet board. And it's really cool. One of the key pieces of it is cool. It is cool. But one of the key pieces to it, if it doesn't fall apart again, I'll pull it up. Let's get this out of the way. Is this thing right here. Well, let's see if we can get a better view. Yeah, right here. That's the Goodwood Audio junction box. And what that box allows you to do, it's very well done, by the way. I highly commend the gang at Goodwood Audio because that thing is really special. It allows you to, so you plug in and then you have, or I asked them to put a special modulation output and then have a dry output. Of course, wet output, so I can do delays and reverbs all in stereo, keep it separate from the dry, keep it separate from the modulation, and it all gets summed, and it has its own specific outputs. So yeah, anyway, I'll take a separate picture of it and put it up for the video. And it's super cool. How does it sound? It sounds insane. It sounds ridiculously insane when you can actually use things in true stereo, keep the dry signal separate, are able to blend the modulation and the dry when necessary so that the modulation isn't affecting the dry. That was a thing that was bugging me. Maybe it doesn't bug other people, but when the modulation affects the dry signal, even when you're separate in stereo with your delays and reverbs, it was just driving me crazy. It's really cool. It's buffered. I made sure that mine was not buffered out to the overdrives in case I wanted to have germanium. Originally, they had set it up before they delivered it to me. They said, okay, yeah, well, we got a buffer. We got buffers here and buffers there, and that's usually a good idea. But they had a buffer out to the overdrives, and I was like, whoa, no buffer out to the dry. Make sure there's a buffer after on the way back in. They're awesome to work with. It was super duper expensive, but it's beautifully crafted. Again, it sounds amazing. Having the stereo separate, the dry up the middle, the whole bit. Okay, that said, here's my take on it. For someone like me who does a lot of what you might call ambient work, what I call cinematic lap steel, whether it's free improvisation or my own solo compositions or my own solo improvisations or my work with other people in those fields, for that, it's really cool and it sounds amazing. It really, like, when you hear it in your DAW after you've recorded, you're like, wow, this is great. But for anything else, I think it's bloody nonsense. Why? Because you have to mix a record, right? And if you're playing pop music or rock music or any sort of modern contemporary music, where are you going to pan all this stuff? Wet, dry, wet sounds like a great idea. But even if you get stuff in true stereo, you have to put it to one side to make room for other instruments in the stereo field, right? Or do you want your wet, dry, wet to take up the whole spectrum? I mean, you can't put your dry right up the middle with the vocal if there's vocals in the music. I mean, you can. It's not a great idea. So what, are you going to put that off to one side and then your wet is going to be full 100% wet, or 80-80 or 70-70? But then where are you going to put the piano, and then where are you going to put the other guitars, and where are you going to put the other instruments? Where are you going to put the backgrounds? You see my point. So for that reason, I think it's pretty much bollocks. I think there's a narrow use, there's a narrow field for this, and while it's super cool and it sounds amazing, it might be a manufacturer construct. What? Yes. And that's with all due respect, with great respect to my manufacturer buddies. I think it's a manufacturer construct. I don't see many people using it in real productions that I've worked on in the last several years. I don't hear of people using it on productions of other people's stuff for the most part. Again, if it's ambient or if it's atmospheric or very cinematic, yes, that could work, but not so much on any contemporary music. I don't know. What do you think? I'd like to hear your opinion of this. I do not regret putting this board together. I do not regret getting the junction box because I can use that in many different ways. This thing is a beautiful piece of work by Goodwood Audio, and they make great custom cables and a whole bunch of other really useful stuff. But I just wonder if it wasn't pedal board builders and manufacturers that came up with this wet, dry, wet. I get that it's cool. It's super cool. I just don't know how useful it is. All right, so that's the report from Ed, who buys too much pedals and spends too much on gear so that you don't have to.